This is part 6 of my 8-part series featuring the interview of Kathleen Stock on the Iain Dale show on LBC on the 16th of December 2021. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you. Let's go to Katie, who's a new caller in Bristol. Hi, Katie.
Hi. I wanted to call to say I think it's perfectly reasonable to say the WHRC declaration is extremist and anyone who signed it, because it calls for such extreme measures. For example, banning all trans women and trans girls from all women's spaces. There was some confusion with the last caller who seemed to think that trans women and girls don't use these spaces today, but they do, and a ban would...
The fact that trans women have been told by, I mean, it starts off, even people that I have some respect for the work of for example, Ray Blanchard, but you know, these men were telling these patients that came through the doors that they could use women's spaces and there wouldn't be a problem, that women would accept it. No, women didn't like it. We didn't accept it. We were often intimidated or afraid by this huge presence if we came across somebody, and we hurried out of that space as quickly as possible. We have never liked it. The thing is that you can't compel me to perceive you the way you wish to be perceived. There are situations in which you can compel me to make certain sounds rather than other sounds, but you can't compel me to think certain thoughts.
And the lives of tens of thousands of people across the country.
Get out, tens of thousands.
I don't know how is that not extremist?
Well, I mean, tens of thousands, we don't really know because we can't get reliable stats
thousands
on...
then, even if it's hundreds.
Well, listen,
ruining the lives of thousands. These people use these spaces every single day for their protection.
So we're talking...
the same misogynistic sexism that you face.
Yeah.
Yes.
So as I said earlier, I think that we need to think creatively about that, and that we could resource...
But you called for a blanket ban. Don't be creative. If the WHRC declaration calls for a blanket ban...
I think that where women... I think that where women and girls get undressed or sleep or are otherwise vulnerable to sexual assault, yes...
Which is in the left.
Yes, you are correct about my view. I think that where women and girls are vulnerable, especially vulnerable to a range of sexual assaults that don't just include the very worst, but also include voyeurism, camera crimes, upskirting, we should protect them. Right, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but we should protect them. Now, it's true, as I said earlier, that there are transsexuals who have been through medical transition, taken hormones for years, and who are I could not tell the difference. They are using those spaces and
to ban them from the
Okay, I don't understand why so many people are prepared to lie that there is no visible difference between a woman and a man with a feminine gender identity, because in almost every case it's clear. I mean, just the size of the skull, the hands, the feet, the lack of the shape of the jaw, the shape of the eye sockets, the broadness of the shoulders, the narrowness of the hips, the fat distribution. There's just the general size, the way they walk, the way they dominate in conversation. I mean, we just saw an example of that right now. Kathleen's on the radio being interviewed, and this Katie person is attempting to dominate from afar through a phone line. It's extraordinary, but it's not the behaviour that you would expect from a woman, because the socialisation is so different.
I have no way of stopping people who look like women from using women's spaces. I have no way of stopping any of it anyway, because I'm not the police. But I'm saying, what I'm talking about is males who have had no intervention whatsoever, who simply say...
a document that says you want to ban all trans women and trans girls, including those who
I think people think that I sat...
We could say...
Katie, you do need to let Kathleen answer.
There's two things to say about this. One, just generally about this WHRC declaration. I was never, I'm just saying parenthetically, I was never asked about this until Sussex and the massive protest kicked off, and suddenly this got discovered as the reason. I mean, it's completely confected. Nobody had a clue I signed that until somebody looked it up 2 months ago. Secondly, I think you all think I was in some sort of big ceremony with a gold pen. I literally got an email and added my name along with hundreds and hundreds of other people.
Well,
so
now you know.
Well, now I do, but you know, and I'm explaining. I'm not
condemn something that's extreme, because
I don't think it is extreme.
Should you not have read it though before you signed it?
I did read it, but have you read it yourself?
What's up with these men? I don't get it. Do they think it's extreme that women want privacy when we're in a vulnerable state of undress? Is that extreme now? Because that's been the norm in every society I can think. I mean, I'm just thinking back to, you know, family events years ago where, you know, the women don't want the men there when they're getting changed. I mean, that's just the stand. That's oh, and to insult the intelligence of a professor of philosophy. To infer that she's signing things without reading them or without agreeing with them. I may disagree with Professor Stock about some issues, but I certainly wouldn't say it was because she hadn't read the basic information that's put. I mean, she is a very intelligent and accomplished woman. She's able to read a document and decide independently, do I agree with this or not? Back to this.
I'm not saying I disagree with it.
That they didn't sort of trigger you to think, oh, maybe this is a little bit much.
Well, no, I'm explaining that this is my view, but I have also said, can I finish my sentence? Because I do think it is...
The answer is no, you cannot finish your sentence. You can never finish your sentence. You are doomed to be interrupted, mansplained and talked over until the end of this call.
Relevant to your question, whether or not you agree. I personally don't see the pressing social problem as trans women who have had medical transitions using women's changing rooms. I see the pressing social problem, for me personally, where I've directed all of my energy in the last few years, is self-ID. And the idea that you don't need to do any of that.
You signed something calling for a blanket ban.
It doesn't call...
If you don't want a blanket ban, why don't you remove your name from the list and condemn the extremist...
Katie, would it make a difference to you if I did? Would you then say that the rest of what I thought was...
No, nothing you do will ever be enough for Katie. There is no appeasing these people. There is no... because they... Look... Society functions along like the basis that we can agree to disagree about certain things. You can't agree to disagree with people who are going to call you an extremist because you hold a completely normal, moderate view, like the fact that you don't want blokes around when your knickers around your ankles.
Or is this just a total nonsense of an objection because you don't like what I say generally, so you found this example and you're going on about it? Because basically...
It's a stick to beat her with. She is publicly labelled a witch, a TERF. She is in line for a verbal lashing. I have no doubt that some of these individuals would attempt to effect some kind of physical violence against this woman and many other women if they felt they could get away with it. They do not like women.
Who cares whether I signed an email or not? My view's my views, and I'm explaining... Well, I got it by email and I signed it. Like, I literally put my name into a box in my computer. I did... This is just a distraction from the fact that I've written a whole book explaining my views. Do you agree with...
Absolutely. I mean, this woman is a published author and she's written lots and lots of things. It's just intellectual poverty and an attempt to score points. She's already explained. She signed the declaration. She agrees with the declaration. You don't agree with it? Great.
The rest of my views. All right, say that, let's forget the blanket ban. Do you agree that self-ID that should not be the criterion of entry into women-only spaces? Do you agree with that?
the situation we have today?
What
Is that what you mean by self-ID?
Do you think that males who say they're women and just on that basis should have access into women's changing rooms?
But that's the situation we've had. Like,
so you do think that's right? Well, I disagree with you. It's a situation that you've had your entire life, and I disagree with you about that too.
I'm not calling to blanket ban use in the toilet. Right. You are calling to blanket ban trans women, regardless of my position, regardless of how well they transitioned.
Right,
how well they transitioned.
Katie, thank you very much.
How well they transitioned. Someone handing out gold stars or something? Is there a prize for the best transition? How well they transitioned. Do they get their gender checkup and go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, congratulations on how well you've transitioned. How well you've transitioned. What does that mean? Does that mean nobody's actually thrown abuse at you for being gender non-conforming in the street? I mean, that's a very low bar to set for success in life. I wish that we could go back to the days when people were applauded for their achievements, such as becoming a professor in a university or writing a book.
You've had a good go there. Simon's got an interesting one. Kathleen, he says, please ask Kathleen if she'd like to ban lesbians from changing rooms in case they set themselves on.
Well, I am a lesbian, so I wouldn't be able to use changing rooms, but as far as I know, lesbians are not...
You can see the logic of the point he's made.
And I will continue, because there's a point that's been made to me several times, as I'm sure you know. The thing is, there's two things there. One is that, as far as I know, lesbians are not responsible for...
The basic point is that lesbians are women. They're women's toilets. So lesbians can use women's toilets.
The vast majority of sexual assaults on females.
No, but there are predatory lesbians, just as there are predatory gay men.
The logic of this suggests that when we've got a safeguarding measure, that if it doesn't eliminate all possible sources of violence against women, then we mustn't have it. And that is not how safeguarding works.
Do you think
excluding males from women-only spaces is a start? Now, of course, it's not going to solve every problem that women encounter, but it's going to reduce the risk, which is what safeguarding does.
I suppose you could argue, though, that, I mean, you've made the argument before, well, that we don't know how many trans men there are in Britain. I mean, Stonewall reckoned that 1% of the population would identify as trans, so that would be 600,000.
I think Iain there has made a little bit of a slip, because he's talking about access to women's toilets and he's referring to trans men. And I understand exactly what he means. He means male persons who have a cross-sex identification as trans women. But he's using the wrong term, and it's really interesting that when men use the wrong term, they are excused, or maybe they're slightly chastised, but they're certainly not mobbed, harassed, issued with rape and death threats. It's a very, very different reaction to when men don't agree with the Church of Gender Jesus.
1,000 people, male and female. Would there be more trans men who are a danger to women in changing rooms?
Trans women?
Sorry, trans women in changing rooms than predatory lesbians, for example. I mean, we can never know that, but it's a reasonable thing to possibly...
Yes, we can know that. There are massive numbers in prisons.
How do these spaces operate? Obviously, there's no one at the door on the average municipal changing room saying, you, not you. Yes, show me your character reference. Okay, so it basically operates by sight. It's a rough and ready. Now, we are hardwired as a species to recognise the opposite sex, which isn't to say that there aren't cases where we won't be able to do it, but most of the time we can. So if someone looks like a male, that gives us a visual clue that they might be male. Well, there is no way of recognising a lesbian, right? There is not, so it just couldn't work like that in spaces. You couldn't have a space for lesbians and not lesbians. They look identical to other women. So basically, again, it's another crap analogy that's used to kind of be a gotcha, as if, you know, if there's a flaw in the logic, we should just abandon all women-men distinctions. It doesn't work like that. Safeguarding is supposed to reduce risk. It couldn't possibly eliminate it.
Do you think that there is a broader ideology behind the trans women are women definition? If so, what is it ultimately trying to achieve?
I don't know. I mean, it's...
I don't know why it really amuses me that Kathleen Stock went, like, oh God, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go?
It's a really misguided strategy on behalf of trans activists, and actually I'm getting letters increasingly and emails from trans people, including trans women, who are saying, I did not ask for this. I know I'm not a woman. If I wasn't a woman, if I was a woman, I wouldn't have had to go through this whole procedure. And they don't agree that the only way for trans women and trans men to get rights is to say that they're literally the opposite sex. So I don't really understand the thinking behind it, because it's been incredibly divisive, as you can see.
Indeed.
Right, I'm going to end this video here, and onwards and upwards. There is a quarter of an hour left to review in the next video. This is the end of part 6. Please watch out for part 7 dropping soon.